Big welcome to our annual general meeting. For those of you who don't know me, and there may be one or two, my name's Mike. I'm the chair of South West London ICB, and it's a real pleasure to have you with us today. This is our second AGM for South West London, and it's the second one I've done as well. So I've actually been here for all of the AGMs, which is quite exciting. I've just seen Elaine. You've had a horrible journey here. It's really good to see you, though. Thank you for coming. So thank you all for making the time to attend today. We're not planning a break in the session. I'll be going through the agenda in a moment. It's a 2-hour meeting, so hopefully that's okay. But if you do need to help yourself to fruit or biscuits or grab yourself another cup of coffee, please feel free to do that as the meeting progresses. The bathrooms are through that door and to the right, well signposted. So please feel free to use those should you need them. I'm going to do some housekeeping now, the exciting part of the meeting. As if by my glamorous assistant Sarah is there with the pointer, and she's moving it on for me. Thank you very much. In the unlikely event of a fire alarm, please gather in the forecourts of the care home next door, that way. A hearing loop is available should anyone need to access it, and please see Alan at the back should you need it. We're going to take questions from members of the public at the end of the meeting. We've had some questions in advance, but I'll be happy to take other questions from the floor should there be any issues that people want to raise. We've asked people to opt out if they do not want to be filmed or photographed, so hopefully you have done that. If you don't want to be filmed or photographed, the event is being recorded and you'd otherwise be on film. We'll be adding sign language to the recording of the AGM, which we'll upload to the website, and we have a feedback form which we'd love you to complete today. There's an online version or a paper version, and the team at the back can direct you towards that. So today's AGM is the AGM for the year that ended on the 31st of March. And you can read our full annual report by following this QR code. And it's a gripping read, really is. Actually, it does capture a lot of amazing work across South West London. And both in place, in our provider trusts, and across the system as a whole. And I think we can be quite proud of many of our achievements last year, in spite of the fact that it was a really challenging year, both operationally and financially. I'd like to introduce you today to our panel. Sarah Blow, who is our Chief Executive, and Helen Jameson, who's our Chief Finance Officer. We've also got some guest speakers, and we'll introduce those as we go through the agenda. We've also got a whole host of board members from the Integrated Care Board here. I wonder if you would stand up if you're a board member and wave to everybody in the AGM. This is the bit I love. Everybody hates doing it, but it's so much fun. Thank you for that. We will now move on to our agenda for the day. So as you can see, we've got Sarah doing a piece about the achievements of the year just gone, and Helen will be giving us an update on the annual accounts for the year. We've then got 3 case studies, and I think we've got fantastic case studies, which I think showcase the breadth of work, the breadth of innovation, and the way in which we in South West London work as a partnership, as a team. We'll be introducing those at the time. We're then going to look ahead to the current year, which we're already in, but a look beyond the current year as well, and I'll come back to Sarah for that. We'll then have questions and answers. So that's the format of today's session. Hopefully you feel that actually will really reflect the work that we're doing in South West London, and give you the opportunity to ask questions, find out more, but also give us ideas if there are things that you think we could and should be doing differently. On that basis, I'm going to hand across to Sarah to look back at the year just gone.
Thank you very much, Mike. So, before I actually start, I'm just going to let you have a look at a film about South West London. So if you didn't know a lot about South West London, hopefully that gives you a bit more information about the people that we serve. So I'm just going to give you a bit of an introduction to South West London as an ICS, an integrated care system, and as an ICB, an integrated care board. So first of all, the integrated care system actually was launched in July 22, as Mike said. We've completed 2 years now, and it replaced what was the South West London Health and Care Partnership. And it's a partnership across our NHS system, but also with our partners, including local authorities, our voluntary sector, GPs, health watches, and all of our providers in the NHS and in care. And together, we plan and deliver our local services for local people. So when we came into being, there's 42 ICSs and ICBs across the country, and we are split into 2 parts. We have the Integrated Care Board, which we're doing the AGM today, and that's the part of the system that actually plans, delivers and funds the NHS. And then we also have an integrated care partnership where we work with our partners and we set the strategic direction for local people across health and care, voluntary sector, and other partners with the NHS. And we're all focused on improving wellbeing for local people in South West London. And as a ICS and ICB, we have 4 key aims, which are set up here, but we want to do our key aims, which you can see are not just about the money and delivery of services, they're about health improvement, health inequalities, better outcomes for our local people. And we want to do that working with our local communities. So it's very important to us that not just through an AGM, but throughout the year, when we're looking at services within the NHS and within partnership, we are working with our local community to make sure we develop those together. So we've already said we've got 6 boroughs. They're very varied, actually, and you saw on the film that 40% of our most deprived population is in Croydon. We have a lot of variability in our populations across South West London. We serve about 1.5 million people. And we have to invest the funding in the best way that we can to deliver the best outcomes for everybody in South West London. We deliver well in South West London in the NHS, so we have got a difficult financial environment in South West London, and Helen will talk about that when she talks to you about the money. But actually, as far as our delivery of what we call the NHS statutory targets, we do really, really well. So we deliver some of the best elective timelines and cancer timelines than anybody else in the country. So if you need an operation in South West London, you're more likely to be seen quickly than you are in another part of the country. I'm not saying that's right, I'm just saying that we actually do very well in South West London. We also have really good primary care. We get really good feedback from our local residents about the quality of our primary care in South West London. And even though we have got a very difficult financial position, we have agreed that position with NHS England. We're working very hard across the system to try and put that right. So as Mike said, we have got an annual report, and in there's huge amounts of examples of some of the really good work that we've done over the last 12 months, and I just wanted to pick a few of those out to talk to you. So one of them is our rapid community response. There is something that we do in the NHS where we respond within 2 hours in the community. So if you have an urgent need, not a life-threatening need, but an urgent need, you can get a community response within 2 hours where a trained health worker will come to your home and will support you to stop you having to go into hospital if you don't need to go to hospital. We have that across all of our 6 boroughs. It's 7 days a week, and we do really well on the targets that we have nationally for this. So it's a really positive way of working with our local community. It's for all people over 18, but generally it's for those elderly or frail people that we can support differently within their own homes. I love this one. This is an artificial intelligence. I think there's 7 pilots in care homes across South West London where we're using artificial intelligence, and what it does is, with the agreement of the person involved, within a care home, within a resident's room, we've set up some devices that can see what would be your normal way of working within your daily routine. And what the AI can do is it can tell if something happens out with that that's extraordinary. And what that means, if someone falls, or they have a problem, the AI will pick that up and they'll flag that to the care home staff so that they can go in and check what's happened. They have done this in other parts of the country, and what they're showing is that it reduces by 20% the amount of time people go into hospital because they're caught early and they know that this has happened. But it also takes the pressure off of those care home staff as well, so it allows them to be doing what they should be doing rather than just checking on people all the time, which is great. It's more than just the services we deliver, it's about the people that live locally. We actually have a priority around social and economic recovery, and actually getting people back into work, particularly from communities where they are actually struggling, is a really important part of what we do in the NHS. So we do encourage people to come and work in the NHS. So there's a piece of work that's going on between Croydon and Coulsdon College, where they've trained and supported people around how they might work in healthcare to encourage people to come into the health environment. We're also working with lots of other colleges and further education institutes to try and think about how can we offer people work placements within the NHS and within care, and how can we work with our local communities to particularly ensure those that are most deprived that they have the opportunity to see what is available to come and work in the NHS, and how we can give them a better start in being able to apply for those jobs. So we're designing that in partnership, and that's something that's really important to us around having our local communities engaged in what we do, but also around us having local people working in local services, which is also really important. And my final example, which I actually love the NHS app, that is maybe just me, but it can do much more than tell you whether or not you've had a COVID jab. Your NHS app, you can make an appointment with your GP, you can order a prescription, you can follow up, depending on whether or not your hospital does it, but you can follow up hospital appointments, you can see your medical record, it's all on the NHS app. We have one of the highest take-ups in the country of the NHS app. We've got almost 900,000 people in South West London accessing the NHS app. Nearly all of our practices are using the NHS app in one way or another. So I would encourage anyone, if you haven't got the NHS app and you haven't downloaded it, please do. What the NHS app also does is it allows those that can't actually access on the app, it means that the phone lines are free for them to contact their practice. So it also helps people that don't have that digital ability to actually be able to access services quickly. So for those of us that like the app and that can use it, we can. And we're not sitting on the phone, bunging up the phone lines for those that can't. So I think it's a really good innovation. I think in the future, the NHS app will be used a lot more by the NHS, and it will be used for many more things. So definitely, I would encourage everyone to download the app and use it, particularly if you live in South West London, because it works. Okay, so I'm going to now hand back to Mike.
Thank you for that, and I think it was really good to look at those innovations that Sarah showcased. In particular, things like AI, things like the NHS app. We're going to hear from Sarah later on about some of the priorities of the new government and how we're anticipating those in advance of the 10-year plan. But these innovations are right at the heart of that. I said at the beginning we've had a challenging time with our finances, but we're now going to hear from Helen Jameson, our Chief Financial Officer, to tell you about the outcome for the year.
Thank you, Chair. So it gives me great pleasure today to be able to present the finances for 23-24. As an ICB, we have a number of financial duties that we need to deliver, and I'm happy to confirm that the accounts have been audited and they are deemed to be a true and fair view, that they have been prepared in line with the guidance and requirements of law, if I put the right slide on, as we go forward, and that we remain within our management budget and we've managed to invest against our mental health investment target. So as I move on, I want to just think about what is it we're really trying to get out of this money? How are we trying to use it, and how are we trying to make a difference for our population's health? So I think we need to recognise that we really want to focus on improving our population's health, to reducing health inequalities and delivering the right high quality of care and ensuring value for money for the taxpayers. So what have we done? How did we spend our money? As ICB is a statutory organisation that commissions healthcare services, we received £3.5 billion in the year. And we delivered within that a 2.5 million surplus to support the system. Of that, about 55% of it was spent with our acute partners and around 10% with our mental health partners. If we look at how that's split and what we spent that on between planned care and urgent and emergency care, we spent about 76% in sector on our planned care and about 80% in sector on our urgent and emergency care. So you can see the majority of our funding is spent in South West London for the South West London population. What else did we buy with that? We can see if we look at our activity between years that we've increased the level of planned care we've managed to deliver, so reducing the waiting list and trying to help and support our population to be healthier. We've seen more people through A&E attendances, and our GP colleagues have done an enormous task of seeing around 8 million patients through appointments, which is an enormous number of people, of which 60% was through face-to-face and 30% was through the telephone. We continue to work and support the system in what we're doing. We want to make sure that we can provide the right care at the right place at the right time, and we've looked at another number of initiatives through our winter funding to be able to do this. So not just spending within our acute sector to increase the beds and support when people are at A&E, but also looking at what else we can do in the wider community through our voluntary sector partners, through improving discharge, and looking at the campaigns we can run to support our population and be able to reach out further into it and to reduce those health inequalities. So as we talked about earlier, the NHS is an absolutely amazing thing that we have here. So one of our campaigns has been focused around that to help and support our population to understand what is out there to help and support them. We continue to invest in reducing health inequalities. We invested our health inequality funding in over 39 projects, of which many of them have been delivered by our voluntary sector partners, and we're really grateful for all their help and support and to be able to do that and really to make inroads into our communities. We will hear later about the virtual wards that have helped and supported us through winter, but also about the Brazil model and how we're looking and rolling that out further and where that comes as part of those initiatives. Again, as I said earlier, we've invested in mental health services. We put an additional £25.7 million into services to help and support patients to be able to live better lives and to improve their quality of life as they go forwards. And that obviously we'll continue to do that as we go, with our aim to be able to shift funding towards prevention and into the community to support our populations to care for themselves. So that was the ICB and what we've done and looked at as an organisation. But what about the finances of the wider system, the NHS system? As Sarah and Mike have said, it's been a difficult year. Within the system, we receive around £5.7 billion, and we spent 5.8 million less than we received in year. But within that, we received an additional £81 million from NHS England, which we are due to repay over the coming years as we go forwards. You can see within this slide the breakdown of the providers of who received the funding and where that went. Also, what's really important is how we look after our infrastructure, whether that be the concrete or whether that be the digital support that we have. And it's really important that we invest in this as we go forwards. Within the year, we spent £185.9 million on our capital. And that was to help and support, both maintain our buildings that we have currently, but also to be able to invest in the future and to be able to move from the analogue world that we've been into the digital world as we go forwards. So really pleased that we've managed to complete a number of really key projects, including the new intensive treatment unit at Croydon. We look at smart theatres, with St George's leading the way in the development of the technology to be able to reduce the amount of carbon we're using and the electricity we're using with theatres being the main source of guzzling electricity, if you like, within a hospital, and actually how can we support that and the net zero journey that we're on. We've worked with primary care. We've put together a lot of investment into the infrastructure so we can start to roll out super fast broadband as we go forwards. So that will help and support our partners in delivering their services and being able to contact them and liaise with the population. And finally, we look to continue to build and develop capacity, whether that be within community diagnostics, whether that be developing primary care estate within most deprived areas that we have, or whether that be the new electronic patient record that's been developed at Epsom and St Helier. So if I look towards the future, it remains a difficult time for us within NHS and finances, and that isn't just South West London, that is across the whole country. We have agreed as a system a £120 million deficit plan with NHS England for the year, and we're continuing to work together to be able to deliver that. We continue to work to develop our financial recovery plan, making sure that we are transforming elective and reducing waiting lists, redesigning the non-elective pathway to improve it for patients and the population as they go through it, and redesigning our workforce to meet the changing needs of our population. And finally, how we develop and integrate our out-of-hospital services and we shift to prevention.
Helen, thank you very, very much for that rapid overview of our finances. And as you can see, it was a challenging year, but we met our key targets in terms of managing the deficit. Both Sarah and Helen are going to stay with us and other board members for questions at the end of the meeting. So if there's any issues arising from either of those reports, please do feel free to ask when we move into questions from members of the public. We're now coming on to actually, this really is my favourite part of the meeting, where we actually hear from many of the organisations, practitioners on the ground about initiatives that are making a real difference to our communities in South West London. We're going to go first of all to, I have the great pleasure to go over to Annette's practice, see this in operation, and it just was so exciting. I've sent so many people down there subsequently because it is really, really exciting. So I think we're in for a treat. Could I ask Annette and Shahina to come and join us up here to tell us about the proactive care programme that we have in Kingston.
Thank you very much, Mike. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Annette Pouts. I'm a GP in Kingston, where I'm also the ICS Clinical Director. And for the last 3 years, I've been the clinical lead on PAC, Proactive Anticipatory Care. And we'd like to share with you today, Shahina and I, Shahina Khan's one of our care coordinators in the New Wimbledon and Worcester Park PC. And I'd like to share with you today what the PAC model is, and Shahina's going to just really excitingly share a case study which I think really brings it to life, what we do in PAC. So if we start, PAC came out of a need to look at how we could address the wider determinants of health for people, improve their quality of life, reduce things like isolation, and therefore make an impact on how people use health services and help people to look after themselves better, but also to have less escalation of risk. So if we think about the fact that there are 170,000 people living with 2 or more long-term conditions and 6,000 people who are included in the proactive care cohort within South West London, and then in Kingston and Richmond we've got 1,800 people living with health inequalities and over 44,000 living with 2 or more long-term conditions and over 16,000 who have been diagnosed with moderate or severe frailty, you can understand how that might lead to some people's risks escalating, people don't always have the right support available, and how people might end up using unplanned care. So the national inclusion criteria for the proactive care model are to have 2 or more long-term conditions, or be suffering from health inequalities, or to be reliant on unplanned care. And we looked to address those within the PAC model, which is a multidisciplinary team model where we work on a strengths-based approach, where there is care planning with the person, goal setting, and we work towards achieving those goals, and through that improving people's quality of life and reducing those risk factors. So if we have a look then at the actual how the model is set up, so we have a multifactorial way of identifying people, but by far the best way to identify people is professional identification. So professionals and other people in the community working with people are by far the most knowledgeable and can understand whether those people would benefit from the PAC intervention. But we also have a risk stratification tool built into the South West London BI Health Insights tool, and we have a search from that as well, which practices address every quarter. And then we have a wider community flag as well from our voluntary sector partners. So we started work on PAC in December 2020, and there was a 6-month design and engagement process where we engaged with over 70 members from our wider system across Kingston and Richmond. That included patients themselves, as well as voluntary sector partners, adult social care, our community services, hospital, etc. After that, we rolled PAC out as a proof of concept, the model that we had designed, across 2 of our primary care networks, one in Kingston and one in Richmond. And after a 2-year proof of concept, and I'll show you some of the outcomes, we then have rolled that out since September last year across all the PCNs in Kingston and Richmond. The model is based around a multidisciplinary team which meets fortnightly for each practice in each PCN. The team is the same for each PCN but varies from PCN to PCN. And within that team there are dedicated care coordinators who work directly with our patients. So a patient is brought to a PAC MDT, a discussion is had, and if that patient is suitable to be accepted onto PAC, a care coordinator is assigned who will then go out and meet that person and start to work on getting to know them, identifying how best we can address their needs, setting some goals with that person and creating a care plan that the person has input into. And then throughout a period of time, the average amount of time that someone stays on PAC is 3 months, but we have people who've been on PAC for over a year. Throughout that time, the care coordinator works with that person at their own pace to try and improve some of those wider determinants of health. And you might say, well, how on earth if people, because we don't discharge people from PAC, it's a step-up, step-down model, and if some people are staying on for a year, how do you manage that? Well, actually, because the average is 3 months, that caseload naturally from step-up or acceptance to step-down naturally maintains itself at an acceptable level, we've found. But, that's something that we look at on an ongoing basis just to monitor that. In addition, what we felt we needed compared to some of the MDT work that we'd done before was a dedicated administrative support to arrange the MDT meetings, which happen virtually, to get case studies in, so to make sure that we have cases to present at or to discuss at each MDT. So our locality coordinators do that as well as taking minutes. They monitor the actions that have been agreed and the tasks to make sure they're done in a timely fashion, and they can also invite specialists to attend. So our core MDT consists of our care coordinators, locality coordinators, members of the primary care team, including GPs. We also have our community services there, community health services, our social workers from adult social care, and our voluntary sector often join as well, our social prescribers. But in addition, we've had Parkinson's nurses, we've had pain specialists, we've had housing specialists, we've had specialist adult social care teams. You name it, we've had a wide range of specialists attend, depending on the needs of the person who are being discussed, so that we can have the right conversation around that person's needs. So just very quickly, some of the outcomes that we've seen. You will see there during the proof of concept we discussed nearly 500 patients over a 2-year period in just 2 PCNs. And in that time, once we analysed the outcomes and the data from that, if patients had been on PAC for 4 months or longer, their unplanned use of care had reduced by 49% overall. If they had stayed on PAC for 4 months or longer and they were admitted to hospital in an unplanned way, their length of stay had reduced by 55% compared to previous admissions. So you might ask, is this, did this continue in the rollout? Because of course, you can more easily achieve sometimes things on a smaller scale, but then when you roll out, you might not see the same benefits. And so far, in the last 11 months, we've seen over 500 patients across Kingston and Richmond through PAC. Those are the patients who have been accepted onto PAC. We also see some patients who are discussed at MDT. We might do other things for them, but they might not be suitable for PAC. And there, you can see, hopefully, from that data that those outcomes are maintained. So we've still got a 51% reduction in unplanned care use and a 57% reduction in length of stay if the person is admitted. And lastly, and I won't read these out, but we have some outcomes from staff and from people who have been supported through PAC. And it is really, really rewarding to see how much our patients have benefited and have felt that benefit really in a real tangible way, you know, in that they're enjoying life more, they're less isolated, they're achieving things they didn't think they would again. But also our staff and how much value they see in the PAC model. Because I think one of the things we also set out to do with this was to help our staff to feel that they were able to achieve something and weren't constantly having to fight against the odds, you know, and I think this is really produces some quality for people in their day-to-day work. So I'm going to hand over to Shahina now. Thanks, Shahina.
Hi everyone, apologies, I'm a bit bunged up, so I don't normally sound this nasal, but I'll push through. So thank you very much, Annette. I am going to try and bring what Annette so eloquently said to life with a real person, a real patient. I worked with this lady probably about 2 years ago, so it was just sort of post lockdown, and she wasn't our sort of usual cohort of patients who were referred to us. We normally would, well, I suppose a typical patient would be someone who's elderly, frail, with an array of long-term conditions, but this lady was much, much younger. 42-year-old lady, she was living in a third-floor flat, suffered from multiple health problems, including chronic pain, diabetes, obesity, poor mobility, so she was a huge falls risk, asthma, depression, the list went on and on. She also had mental health issues and had been diagnosed some years earlier with emotionally unstable personality disorder. Yeah, got that right. Was also, it had also transpired that she was a regular user of pain medication and cannabis. She was very open about that. And she also had quite a troubled past history of traumatic relationships and a recent bereavement in the form of losing her mother. So there was a lot going on with this lady. And so the GP obviously had felt that this was an appropriate referral to bring to the MDT. The GP felt that the patient had just lost motivation and confidence to go out, primarily as a result of the pandemic, but also because she had increased pain and mobility issues and also had a recent bereavement, as I've already mentioned. She'd not attended many of her regular GP appointments, and because of her personality disorder, lots of mood discrepancies as well. So the GP thought this is an appropriate patient to bring to an MDT. We accepted the referral. I was allocated as her care coordinator. As Annette said, we like to go and meet our patients. I did a home visit with her and talked about setting some goals with her to sort of see what we could do in order to just improve her general sort of health and well-being. And it was great because we sit down and we sort of construct the care plan together, and we talk about goals. And even if the person feels that those goals are completely unachievable, I said, look, let's just put it down. You never know. We might get a little way forward in trying to, make life a little bit better for you. So some of the goals that we talked about were simple things, like she said that she was finding it difficult because of her mobility or lack of mobility to do simple tasks. So would it be possible to get some equipment and adaptations to the home? She was also finding it difficult to do her own personal care, showering, washing, etc. Could she get some help with that? It transpired during our meeting that she also had financial issues. She was finding it difficult to pay her bills, and clearly money management was a little, she was finding that quite overwhelming. Mental health support, she was very open with me about her personality disorder and what that meant, and that she felt that she needed help. She had some mental health intervention in the past, but felt that it hadn't really been very successful. So I said, no, let's put that down as a goal as well. Let's see what we can do. We talked about potentially some bereavement support for her. So there was a lot going on. So we had a great big list of goals. So there was a lot for me to work on. Thanks, Annette. So we went on a journey together. Now, I know Annette said that on average, a PAC patient is on the programme for approximately 3 months. But that wasn't quite enough for this lady. So I worked with her probably for about 8 months, but there was a lot to do. There were some simple fixes. So with regard to her, help with personal care, I made a referral to adult social care, and they allocated a social worker fairly swiftly, who arranged for a care needs assessment to be done, and she now gets 2 care calls a day. We got a key safe fitted for her, so professionals can come in and out without her being disturbed. With regard to adaptations to the home, I made a referral to occupational therapy, who came and did a visit and just did an assessment of the home, and she's now got various handrails in the bathroom, in her bedroom. She's got perching stools so that she can now sit in the kitchen and prepare meals for herself. And the patients reported that this equipment has just, they're simple things, but they have enormously raised her standard of living, because she's now able to manage to do simple tasks like getting up and washing, which we all take for granted. With regards to the support with mental health, within the GP surgery, there was actually a mental health nurse. So I thought, well, okay, that seems like a natural referral to make. Why not, within the surgery? So I did that. I went along with the patient because she had DNA'd on a number of previous appointments. So I had to just give her some gentle encouragement to go along, and that meant actually physically going with her. And she established a very good relationship with the mental health nurse within her practice. She had a review of her medication done, and that sort of led to other mental health input. We also managed to refer her to the wellbeing service for her cannabis use, as well as a group called the Sun Project, which is a sort of a group therapy for people with personality disorders. With regard to the debt, I arranged for her to have a benefits check just to make sure that she was getting all the right benefits. We got her a supply of food vouchers from a local food bank, and also I referred her into a debt management agency who could just sort of talk to her about long-term managing her money properly. With regard to, social isolation, that was quite a big one because we'd just come out of the pandemic, this lady had not left her home for probably about a year. She didn't really show any initial interest in joining any groups when I first went to meet her, but after some period of time, we built that trust, and I encouraged her gently, but forcefully as well, to try and attend a couple of local groups. And there was a wonderful Living Well hub that one of the social prescribers in the local area had set up. and it was open to all. There was no criteria for joining. It was very chilled out, and I went along with her, and she really enjoyed it and managed to make some friends, and now goes quite regularly. So that was a great win as well. So I think I've talked, as I've gone along, I have talked about the challenges with this patient, but we've had some great outcomes with her. She's reported that she seems much happier, and she's coping better now because of the support that she's received, just with simple things like doing, help with the housework, help with her personal care. She feels clean. She can go out and present herself to the rest of the world. She has reported that she's had a tremendous improvement in her mental well-being. She's actually went on a dating app and managed to find herself a new partner as well, and so that was great, who I then met, and so they're going to community groups together. That increased confidence has sort of shown through in many different ways. She's become much more independent. She's now confident traveling and going to see her family. She's reported a decrease in her drug intake because she just says, I feel calmer, I feel more content, so I don't need to take it as much as I used to. I said, fantastic, great stuff. And Annette talked about that we don't close cases. We don't sort of tell the patient that we're done with you now, go away. We're moving on to the next. We step people down. So that's really, and she was confident. The patient was confident for me to step her down because she felt that she had the support that she needed, and she also felt reassured that she knows who to contact. She's got a network of people now that she knows can help her and support her should she need it. And so actually that wasn't such a difficult, normally those conversations are quite difficult to have with patients about stepping down and moving on, but no, she felt very happy and content, and yes, it was a pleasure to work with her. So yeah, I hope that has demonstrated the amazing impact of PAC and the model.
So a big thank you to Shahina and Annette for that presentation. I think when we hear about the outcomes from a system point of view, 51% reduction in unplanned visits, 57% reduction in length of stay if people do get admitted. They're amazing. And then we hear about how it changes people's lives. So thank you for the case study as well. Really important that we remember why we do this, as well as manage the way in which we do things. Moving on to virtual wards now. And I think it must be about 6 years ago when Matthew said, you've got to go and have a word with Chris Bell. He'll tell you about virtual wards. So Chris is here. Chris did tell me about virtual wards. I thought, this sounds really exciting. Wonder if it'll work. 6 years later, we have one of the largest programs of virtual wards in the country, and I think the best. So I'm really pleased to welcome Anna and Ailing, who are going to tell us about virtual wards.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Aisling Vaugh, and I am the operational lead for the Croydon Virtual Ward.
And I'm Anna Ryan, one of the inmates matron for Croydon Virtual Ward.
So we've come to talk to you today about Virtual Ward in South West London. So what is Virtual Ward? Essentially, Virtual Ward is hospital at home. So we care for people within their own homes through face-to-face visits where they can undergo full physical assessments, through telephone calls, and by the use of technology. Now, we are supported to do this by our colleagues in the Remote Monitoring Hub in Croydon who care for those people, and they monitor all of the inputs that's coming through on the system of what's happening with the patient on a day-to-day basis, 24 hours a day. So across South West London, we've had over 9,000 patients supported on Virtual Ward in the last year. We have a step up and step down model. So almost 5,000 patients were supported to remain at home. This means they never needed to go into hospital to receive the care. And almost 4,000 patients were allowed to come out of hospital at an earlier point in their care. So in terms of referrals, South West London receive approximately 750 to 1,050 patients into our service every month. And on average, patients stay approximately 7 days, but this we can increase this or decrease this depending on the patient's needs. So in Croydon, we actually started our virtual ward a little bit earlier than 2022. We've had our virtual ward since COVID-19. And it has been quite successful. We have been extremely supported by our acute trust and also by our community services. We receive approximately 450 to 650 referrals a month in Croydon, and we have managed to support 250 people on technology since virtual ward started in 2022. So I'm going to hand you over to Anna so she can talk more about the work that's been happening in Croydon.
Hi, so as I said, I'm the in-reach matron, so my role within Croydon Hospital is supporting discharges or transfer of care for patients to continue their treatment or monitoring at home. So in Croydon we do have various pathways that we have. So we're doing lots of fluid overload patients, exacerbation of chronic respiratory issues, and then the kind of generic infections that never quite fit in one little box. We're also continuously wanting to improve and do the next thing and support more and more patients. So we're doing really well with our oxygen weaning. So patients who come in with an exacerbation of COPD, but actually we can't quite wean them down. We work with our respiratory team. We would issue the monitoring kit in the hospital. We'll send them home with oxygen pre-set up at home. We'll then work with them over a couple of days, weeks, and actually titrate that oxygen down until they're back to their normal baseline, but with the improved care of having their own independence at home. So I've actually got a very brief case study of a patient from last week, actually. So we're working closely with our ITU, so our intensive therapy unit, which is obviously quite brand new. So actually last week we had a 31-year-old who came in with sudden onset shortness of breath and chest pain. She was diagnosed with bilateral pulmonary embolism. Normally she would have stayed in hospital for about a week, getting treatment, weaning down off oxygen. She actually managed to be in A&E for less than 12 hours, ITU for less than 2 days, and came straight home on the virtual ward. So before she went home, we issued her with our monitoring kit. So her vital signs were all being monitored by our hub. She then had a full clinical review at home the next day. We provided some bits of equipment because her mobility had gone down a bit since being unwell. She's now doing incredibly well, and actually we're looking to discharge her from our monitoring in the next couple of days. But ultimately, she's spent most of her care at home with her daughter, with her husband, in her own bed. So that's just one example of how actually in Croydon we tailor the needs for the patient. No patient fits in a nice box. And actually, although we have guidance on pathways, we're very fluent in we want to support the patient as best as possible. So we will tailor their care for their needs. All our patients do get a full holistic assessment at home. So we look in their fridge, we look at their equipment, we make sure they can get on and off their bed. Because actually we don't just look at their health condition, because their health condition is one aspect of them. So we do all sorts to actually support that patient to keep them at home for as long and as well as possible. So on that note, I'm going to pass you back to Aisling just for a bit of patient feedback.
So what do people think of our service? So we received this email last week, and I'm going to just read it out. I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who came to my aid at a very desperate time health-wise. It is with heartfelt appreciation I write to you all. The speed that I was seen was amazing. The dignity in which the nurse practitioner dealt with my situation and ordered my life-changing equipment was amazing. You all made a desperate, overwhelming time more bearable. I do not know how we would have coped as a family without your assistance. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
A really fantastic example of how we're making a real difference. And I think that example at the end, Anna, was really helpful, where we show that we're flexible. So yes, we can make significant investments in technology, but actually we also need to make sure that we can tailor that around people's needs, people's capabilities, people's capacities. So Aisling and Anna, thank you. I'm now really pleased to have Jenny Ellingham, one of the GPs from Battersea Primary Care Network, and Habiba Green, who are going to join us, tell us how they've taken a model developed in the slums of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil and brought it to the slightly less challenging but still tough area of North Battersea. So thank you.
Thanks very much. Good afternoon. Over the past 18 months, the ICB has awarded inequalities funding to Battersea Primary Care Network to set up a pilot community health and wellbeing project. Habiba and I are going to take you on its journey from Brazil to Battersea. The community health and wellbeing workers, known locally as the CHEWIs, are a new member of our primary care team. And the PCN has worked collaboratively with a number of agencies to make this happen. We're really grateful to the ICB, not just help with funding, but also with the vision to help us deliver this project. Thank you also to Wandsworth Public Health for their input, Roehampton University for their assistance with ongoing evaluation, and to our friends at Wandsworth Community Empowerment Network and Enable, who have helped us in the day-to-day support. So our story takes us from the favelas of Brazil, through the estates of Pimlico, and onto the Doddington estate in North Battersea. Community health and wellbeing workers have been a central part of delivering primary care in Brazil over the past 25 years or so. There are now over 275,000 community workers covering most of the country. The central premise of this scheme is that workers are employed, not volunteers, and they are taken from their local community. This enables the workers to have time to focus on their work and to understand the needs of their local residents. I think it's really important to know these are not clinically trained workers. They are non-clinical, but are trained to work holistically with the people that they come across. And so each worker is given an area, a block of flats, a road, a community area, and they concentrate on that area week by week, day by day, month by month. So they set up about one full-time equivalent worker to 150 households, and they visit each household once a month. They identify needs early, and they work holistically across the whole family. They are not targeting one particular type of person, one particular type of patient. They are working across the breadth of who they visit. So this isn't a brief, focused, short-term intervention, but a long-term relational program which integrates health and social care. And over the 25 years, these workers have become a vital part of Brazil's primary health care team, and they have helped to address many of the health inequalities seen in that country, including a whopping 35% reduction in CVD mortality. The Brazil model was brought over to the UK and was first set up on the estates in Pimlico in 2021. They started with 4 community health workers visiting 600 households in the area, and I think you can see from the slides, the evaluation was quite amazing in that first year. And so to Battersea. Battersea Fields Practice, where I'm one of the partners, has been working on the Doddington estate for about 35 years now. And we agreed as a PCN that my practice would host and drive this project. The Doddington has got very high levels of core 20+5 with a wide range of cultural diversity. And despite our work over many years to try and address health inequalities, we've got ongoing concerns about the increasing impact of them in our area. North Battersea is also changing rapidly. I don't know if you've been up to the power station recently, but that's part of our patch. And so we are now taking a large quantity of these new patients. We're the practice that's accepting the Wandsworth patients living in the Nine Elms and Battersea Power Station. And so our demographic is changing quite rapidly at the moment. And so to be offered this project where we could continue to concentrate and really grow our work with our more deprived communities who really need our focus was really exciting, and we leapt at the challenge. So our funding enabled us to set up one full-time equivalent worker, initially visiting 120 households. So we knew the team was going to be crucial. We knew from the start that employing motivated, relevant and approachable community health and wellbeing workers was essential to the success of the project. And you can see Habiba and Rihanna in the background there. They've been absolutely crucial in developing the role and engaging with our local community. Dr. Ellie Norris, who's one of our salaried GPs, works as their clinical supervisor, and she's been supporting them on a day-to-day basis. And she supports also their ongoing training and developing further links within our community. However, the project has relied upon a wider team of stakeholders and support, and we want to thank you, everyone, who's been involved with us so far. So we're a year on now. We remain small, but our level of contact with households has been encouraging. The experience of Pimlico is that effective evaluation will only be reached with a minimum of 600 households and 4 full-time equivalent workers. And so we're still a way away from that, but we're continuing to recruit and we're adding to our households. And our aim is that we're going to reach this sweet spot of 600 soon, but we want to ensure that we've got a stable and effective team. So what have we done so far? Well, we've just recently recruited a service manager who is going to help us more with our evaluation. We're currently recruiting a new community worker, and so the idea will be that we will move up to about 240 households very soon. I didn't write this down, but I'll have to read it off the slides. We've done 846 door knocks so far. Since October 23, we've engaged about 408 residents so far, and we've had 487 meaningful contacts. Now, Habiba, come and tell us what you mean by a meaningful contact.
Hi, everyone. So meaningful contact could be when you visit them at their home, and they answer the door and you just have a conversation with them, see how they are, or it could be through a message or a phone call, or just if you see them in the community, out on the streets or in a community centre, and you just have a conversation with them and check up on them.
And so each of these meaningful contacts, you note them and you've got a spreadsheet, and that's what we're using to evaluate what we can do. Yeah. And so part of your conversations is what can we do, how can we refer you on, what can we do, and I'll show you some of the results of that in a minute. The other thing that they've been doing is, in terms of engaging with the community recently, has been setting up some breakfasts. Tell us a bit about your breakfasts.
Yeah, so it's called Breakfast and Wellbeing, and we offer free breakfast for residents. We have a wellbeing session, so we have different topics. So we've had like a cancer awareness for screenings, diabetes, blood pressure, and mental health, coping with stress. And so yeah, they've been really good. We've had quite a good turnout with that.
So I think with the cancer one last week, you had 30 residents, which is a really good turnout for where we live, which is fantastic. What else have we done? Well, Habiba and Rihanna have been amazing ambassadors. Similar schemes have been set up in other parts of southwest London, and they've been working hard to help support those schemes. And also nationally, people have heard about us, and projects are springing up around the country exactly like this, and they're always keen to know how things have been going for people who are a little bit down the road. So we've been working as ambassadors for this across the country. It got into the notice of Prof. Bowler, who's the NHS Inequalities Lead, who came to visit us, and she was very impressed with the work that Habiba and Rihanna are doing, and feels that this completely aligns with the priorities of the NHS Inequalities Plan at the moment. They've both become champions for the National Association of Primary Care, And it's given us the opportunity to start developing new initiatives on the estate. So, for example, we've been working with a charity recently, setting up a parenting course in order to bring families that are struggling in and learn new things about parenting. And only through having these links within the community were we able to roll out sort of such programs, which is fantastic. And I think going forward, and as we're hearing more and more about integrated neighbourhood teams, I can see that the community health workers would be an integral part of that, bringing together local communities, social care, mental health, physical health. I think they could be a really, really important part of what we're going to do going forward. So the Brazil model has always integrated social and health care. And so our early evaluation shows that the TUIs address a wide range of needs for our local residents: health issues, local authority and housing issues, as well as connecting with our wider community partners. And our data collection is currently being evaluated and is showing signs of reaching our short and medium-term outcomes. Our residents' feedback has also shown that they value the workers' input. This has been through help with their physical and mental health, but also through vital connections with local services, again, integrating our residents further into their local community. But things kind of come alive when people talk about what they've actually been doing on the ground. And unfortunately, Rihanna can't be with us this afternoon. But I think this quote from one of our residents says it all, and just how much they value them. Habiba, come and tell us some stories.
Hi, so I'm going to speak about 3 residents that I work with. So the first one, he is a drug and alcohol user, and on one of my visits, after speaking to him, I realised he was having suicidal thoughts. So I took this to the safeguarding lead, who called him into the GP practice and found he had really high blood pressure at the time, which was could obviously be really fatal. So he got help with that, and he was having a lot of DNAs, so not attending GP appointments for checkups and things like that. And I also took him to the drug and alcohol service and just helped him with that, getting that support for getting off the drugs and alcohol. Oh, yeah, and the other 2. So one resident, she's a single mother of 4 kids, and she was really struggling financially just to pay the bills. And she was working full-time as on a nursing apprenticeship. And I just mentioned to her after a few visits that, why didn't you apply for universal credit? And she was really apprehensive about doing that. But after a while, she eventually applied, and she was accepted, so she was eligible for universal credit. And her whole mood changed after that. She's just been so much happier since I've been visiting her, because that financial burden has been obviously taken off her shoulders. And the last resident, so she lives with her mum and her daughter and her partner at the time, and they were both struggling really with mental health issues, just like depression and anxiety and stuff like that. So I referred them to Talk Wandsworth, and a few visits later I asked, how is that going? And they said it's really been helping them. And unfortunately, she had been suffering from domestic violence with her partner, so I referred to domestic violence services to help her with that. And they've just really benefited from both the mental health services and the domestic violence services. Thank you.
And I think you can see from very brief case studies just the breadth of what Habiba and Rihanna are able to see and uncover. I think what we see from people with multiple DNAs to the GP, and so they're under our radar. We don't see them, and yet they're in dire straits. And because Habiba looks after a block of flats, and she goes and knocks on people's doors, we find and uncover those things, and then we can get on and treat them. She's also shown us how the longevity of and relationalness, if I can say that, over time means that she builds trust, and finally people feel that they can accept the services that we're offering. And you can see as well just how that she's got an understanding of safeguarding. So even with non-clinical training, we're able to bring people up to a great ability to be able to spot things and to signpost them onto the most appropriate places. Thank you so much. So what of the future? Well, we want to be in this for the long term. It's not going to work if it's short and brief, is it? We believe that this is an important project, And just like Brazil, it could change the shape of primary care in the UK. The pioneers in Pimlico say that working on this project is like addressing core 20+5 issues on steroids. It seems to really make a difference. And Pimlico's experience is being shown around in the other projects around the country as well. So what of the future? Well, we want to build a resilient and long-term team, reaching and exceeding our sweet spot of 600 households, so that we can start to really get some good evaluation. We want to show through that evaluation that we can address the NHS priorities around health inequalities and social determinants that are so crucial at this time. And most of all, we want to continue to build trust within our locality, to see the residents and the communities whom we serve thrive and flourish. Thank you.
Jenny and Habiba, thank you so much for sharing that with us. It was so good to hear about that model, about using some of our local people to actually drive change and improve the lives of their communities. So that's really exciting. One thing I've been doing over the last year is, on behalf of the 5 ICBs, is chairing a deliberative inquiry approach with the public around the future of primary care in London. One of the propositions that we tested was the public's appetite for this type of intervention. I have to tell you, it still hasn't been published, the report, but at last week's meeting, which was the final meeting of that group to look at the recommendations, we will be putting a very strong recommendation in that report that the future model of primary care in London needs to feature programmes like that. So big thank you both. So we're now going to hear more about the future. I'm really pleased to hand back to Sarah.
Thank you. I get all the best jobs. Follow that, Sarah. So thank you, guys. Those were really fantastic examples of some of the really good work that's going on in the community and in the virtual ward as well. And I think some of our speakers are going to hang around to the end, so there's going to be a Q&A at the end. So if you've got any questions for them, they'll hang around and answer questions. We will put a mic in their hands and let them talk to you. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the new direction of the new government that's come in recently, but also how we plan to ensure safe and sustainable services in South West London and how we're going to continue to work in partnership as we take those things forward. So first of all, you will have seen in the media that Lord Aradazi, who is actually an eminent surgeon within the NHS, has done a review of the NHS over the last few years to identify some of the problems and some of the challenges that we are facing. It's often being referred to currently as the diagnostic of the NHS and what the problems are. And he's identified a number of areas, including the fact that it's not always been an NHS problem. You know, we've lived through austerity and the health of the population after COVID has actually got worse. So we are dealing with some significant problems that are not directly within our control, but there are also some things that we are dealing with that we may be able to control in the future, which is how we invest our money. So we haven't maybe invested as much as we should do in infrastructure nationally, but also we need to make that shift towards more primary and community. And you've heard some fantastic examples of when we've done that and really made a difference to people and how we can actually prevent people from becoming really ill by supporting them at a much earlier time. Also, you know, a real recognition that following COVID, we've really got a backlog of people within the NHS that we've got to ensure get seen quickly, including those that are waiting for operations or for mental health appointments or other things. And also that we need to listen to people. I mean, I think that was one of the major recommendations as well, is that as an NHS and social care, we need to listen to local people as well as to our staff and really make changes based on what they're saying to us. So that was, you can read the Darzi report, it is available online, and it's not too long a read, should I say. It's about 160 pages, depends on whether that's too long a read for you. But coming out with the solution, so they're talking about what's the prescription for this diagnostic. Well, there is a national plan to have a new 10-year NHS plan. And there's work going on currently nationally around developing that plan to deal with those problems. And we are expecting as an ICB to be able to come and talk to local people about that in the next few months. So we're expecting to get some information from the national NHS and from the government, and we'll also get the opportunity to feed into that work locally to develop that 10-year plan for the NHS. So they talk about 3 shifts, and that's where the focus will be, and the 3 shifts being the move from analogue to digital, the move from hospital to community, and also the move from sickness to prevention. So we expect the 10-year plan to be focused around those 3 shifts. Locally, we already have developed, prior to the new government coming in, a 5-year plan, which we developed in partnership with local people and our communities. And we also have a number of priorities for our integrated care partnership. So there's 2 big plans that we have in South West London that we've worked with partners to develop over quite a long period. And when you look at those plans, the Joint Forward Plan, as you can see, has 8 priorities, but many of those are focused on the areas that we talked about within those shifts. So things like reducing health inequalities, keeping people well and out of hospital, using technology, which is part of that analogue to digital shift. So there's a number of the areas that we have already identified in our plan that I think will fit neatly with the new government 10-year plan that is coming for us. But also when we work in partnership, we identified with local authorities, with our voluntary sector, a number of areas where we want to work together. Some of those actually align directly to our ICB plan, which you would expect because we are part of the same system. And some of them we want to do together in a different way, not just focusing on the NHS, which is really, really important. So community-based support for older and frail people. We've seen some of the examples again of how we can do that through virtual ward, how we can do that through working with our communities. But these are our priorities, and we've been working hard on these, and we had a real focus this last 12 months on our workforce challenges. But can I say this has been difficult. Again, the capacity that people have to make some of this happen is really hard. So I'm not going to suggest we've got it all sorted, because we haven't, and there's a huge amount more work for us to do across South West London. Which takes me on to our missions as an NHS. We have identified, as you know, that we've got a significant financial problem. But in order to meet that financial problem, we know we've got to get a real focus in some areas, particularly around transformation, but also how we will redesign some of the pathways we have, how we will really focus on that shift into the community, how we redesign our workforce, because we know that the workforce we have and the way we're set up doesn't deliver the best value or the best outcomes for local people. And we also know that we cannot continue to deliver services in the way that we are with the money that we have. So we've set up a missions board with 5 clear missions to try and help us to get into that financial recovery, but also to transform services within the NHS. And Mike, that was a quick whiz through, but I think probably it's better that we pause and give people enough chance to ask questions rather than me talking for too long, which I'm sure you would like to do.
Thank you, Sarah. And I think that was a good sense of the opportunities that we have moving forward. That will be definitely part of our ambition. We are in an interesting part of the electoral cycle. We have a new government with a significant majority. That means there is an opportunity to move forward on a range of more radical areas which have been difficult to move forward on in the past, in recent months, because everyone was preparing for an election. So that's not a party political point, that's just a point about the timing of being able to move forward. So we're going to move to questions from the audience. We've had a number of questions submitted in advance. Could I check whether Kiran Kurian is here? No. Okay, in which case I will summarise her question. She's asked about the peer-led patient education programme, which was formerly known as the Expert Patients Programme, and she's keen to know what our future plans are in that area. Mark.
So So just Hi, so can you hear me okay? Yeah, I'm Mark Creelman, I'm the Place Executive for Merton and Wandsworth at the ICB. Just to say real commitment to self-management programmes, because when we talk about integrated neighbourhood teams, etc., that's going to be a real pillar of us supporting people to maintain their own health, and Sarah's mentioned things like the app, etc. So that's a real pillar. With the expert patient programme, there was a pause after COVID, but we're certainly intending to commission services for the rest of this financial year, and we've asked Kieran to help us coordinate that. But moving into integrated neighbourhood teams, self-management absolutely needs to be part of the conversation and part of the planning.
Thank you, Mark. You might want to hold on to that microphone because the next one is also for you. This is the Mark show, by the way. Tony Burton, is Tony Burton here? In which case, I'll summarise the question from Tony. Tony is the Secretary of Mitcham Green and Heritage and has asked for an update on progress with the Health and Wellbeing Hub in Mitcham, known as Wilson, the Wilson site. Mark.
Okay, so just going back to some of the presentations that we've heard already, I am back on. We are really committed to improving the health services for people in East Merton because they are part of our core 20+5. We do know that they have poorer health outcomes and live in some of the most deprived communities. So what we have done, whilst we wait for the build project to progress, was we have an MRI scanner now at the Wilson. We have health and wellbeing services. It also doubles up as a vaccination clinic, and we have mental health services as well. So whilst we also do the planning around the build, we have been putting services in there for the local community. Now with the build, there have been delays with the build. We mentioned about the financial challenges that we're not just seeing as an ICB, but we are seeing across the country. We've had to review where we were at with the build project, and that kind of took us to, should we refurbish the building rather than rebuild the building? So we've been working with our property services colleagues in doing that review of the refurbishment needs. That's coming to an end now. It's taken longer than we anticipated because it is a complex building. It's a very old building, and so to refurbish it, we do need to make sure that we've looked into everything. And then the findings of that will be shared with our partners and with our stakeholders about what those next steps are. Really key, the Wilson would be about integrating existing services, bringing them together and bringing them closer to the communities based on some of the experiences of our presenters earlier.
Mark, thank you very much. Is Martin Skivia here? In which case I will read Martin's question. He's asked about the hybrid, could get a microphone to John, please. He's asked about the closed loop diabetes pump. John, you're going to take this one.
Thank you, Chair. So, Martin, firstly, thank you for the question, but more importantly, thank you for the challenge, because you have written to us and making sure that that we're on top of this. So, hybrid closed-loop technology signalled by the NHS that we were going to introduce this late last year. There was an agreement with NICE, and to say it's a slightly complex programme is an understatement. So, there are a couple of things that needed to be lined up. We needed to make sure our 4 main providers had sufficient numbers of staff who were adequately trained, because while this is great technology, you actually have to get used to using the technology. Staff have to be confident in knowing how it works, because if they don't, their chance of getting patients to successfully use it reduces. So the first thing is making sure that we've got the people side sorted. The second challenge was at the NHS. We like a little bit of bureaucracy. It's important that we pay attention to the money. So we had to make sure all the right commercial agreements were in place, both at a national level and at a local level. So I'm pleased to say that's been sorted. And now we're ready and rolling with the programme. Now, some early data would suggest that so far for children and young people, we've got over 500 kids who are currently using hybrid closed loops, which sounds fantastic. However, it means that there is another few thousand children as yet who we have yet to get to. So we're having those conversations with the providers, seeing what more we need to do, making sure we're not putting any daft barriers in the way of our colleagues who are trying to deliver these new devices to children and young people. while we have talked about health inequalities earlier in here today, the early data shows to me that we need to pay really careful attention to two things. We need to have a look at the socio-economic groups who are sort of achieving higher uptakes of these devices. So it appears with some initial data, and it's a small group sample, that those from more deprived neighbourhoods are less likely to receive this device. So we need to pay really careful attention to this to make sure that even though we do bring in new technology, we don't increase healthcare disparities. And the second thing we're paying attention to is also from people from ethnic minority backgrounds. Some preliminary data would show that actually we're not reaching all of the target groups in the same way equally. So that's an important thing for us. It's one of our principles here in the ICB. We reassuringly will have a national review with Professor Partha Kaur, which is coming up in November. No better man to hold our feet to the fire, and I can say that. So I'm really keen that my team, the Meds Ops team, but more importantly our providers, that we work together to introduce this new technology, because if you've talked to any families who look after children and young people who have type 1 diabetes, this is absolutely, and to an overused word, an absolute game changer. So I think we're obliged to get this out as quickly as we can.
John, thank you for that. And for those of you who don't know, John is our medical director at the ICB. And I think it's really good. Again, it's a good demonstration of how we are adopting and rolling out new technology, but again, not losing the fact that we need to make sure that we don't increase health inequalities in the way in which we do it. Can I check, do we have, could you pass the microphone to Elaine, by the way, please, John? Do we have Councillor Jennifer Gould with us? In which case I will summarise her question. She has asked about how we will give women's health greater prominence. Our Chief Nurse, Elaine Clancy, will answer that.
Thank you, Mike. Obviously, women's health is extremely important to us, and me personally, as mother of a daughter and a busy working woman. We have spent a lot of time talking about women's health within the ICB, and we've enjoyed some of our national experts come down to do some board seminars with us and educate colleagues in terms of the importance of women's health. We've been working with our acute providers and our acute trusts in terms of where the needs are across South West London and what we want from our women's health hubs. Also learning across the country with some of the centres of excellence of where places have started their pilots. I think we're about there with our criteria. I think we feel that we will be able to deliver our first pilot of our Women's Health Hub by December of this year, in line with the NHS operating plan, with a rapid programme to roll out some further across South West London. And I think we're quite excited about that and the next 6 or 12 months in terms of the development of those.
Great, thank you, Elaine. I'm now happy to open up to questions from any of you today. Gentleman here, thank you. Would you introduce yourself when you ask your question as well?
I certainly can.
Thank you.
My name is Kasim. I'm the engagement lead for COOTH, which is also commissioned for by the ICB. So weirdly enough, before I came here, I was over in Donington, on the Donington estate, seeing a lady called Elizabeth at the community hub. And I've been having... You said earlier on something to the effect, somebody earlier on was saying something to the effect of trying to meet, one of the missions is to try to meet as many people as they can in the community. One of the issues that I've had is I go to a lot of schools, I engage with a lot of communities, but I somehow can't seem to break the barrier of many black men and black families, and I talk from a black person myself. There seems to be a cohort that will meet and talk to the services, but many of them aren't. And on in Donington Estate, what Elizabeth was sharing with me is that there are a lot of families, but most of them aren't necessarily engaging. She's engaging with the same people. So my question is, what do you plan? How do you plan, particularly if you're going to be using that technology, how are you going to meet the cohort of people who won't engage if you're wanting to prevent? Because if you're wanting to prevent, I'm guessing the people who don't want to engage with you are the people, particularly from thinking about black people and mental health down the road. How are you going to engage those? That would be my question. So it's a big question.
Absolutely fantastic question. And I think one of the things that many of us learned, maybe for the first time, was the lack of trust from some of our communities towards the NHS. And we learnt that during COVID as people didn't want to engage, and there were good reasons why people historically didn't want to engage. So we've put a lot of work into trying to understand that. Projects like the one we showcased that's working in the Doddington estate are part of that. We know it's a long process because it's about building trust with those communities, and that trust has been fractured over many years. Sarah, to Jenny, would you like to?
Yes, I agree. I completely agree. We've been working on the Doddington and the Patmore, as I say, for over 35 years now, and we do know the problems there, and I know Elizabeth well. She's great. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. And really interesting, I think Habiba was telling me recently that even going into different blocks of flats, even if you go into Arthur Court and St George's Court, which are right next door to each other, uptake is different because there's different bits of different demographics living in different bits of the Doddington, which is fascinating in itself. So we're beginning to understand a microscopic level now what we knew before. We're finding, so we've been doing a lot of community events on the Doddington over the last couple of years to try and engage and bring people in that are new. But I share Elizabeth's frustration and your frustration. And that's why we want Habiba and Rihanna and all the other community workers to carry on, because at the end of the day, they are knocking on people's doors and people are letting them in when normally they wouldn't come anywhere near us. So that's why I think Habiba and Rihanna are so fantastic.
Fantastic question, Kasim. I'll ask Charlotte, who's our communications director.
Yes, because you're very handily sitting next to Sarah, who is is our director of the VCSE Alliance, because you're totally right. We need to work a lot harder, I think, probably about how we listen to communities, and that really is all about trust. And Sarah has been doing some great work with us, funding, very small pots of money, like £200, £300, to talk to community leaders and community groups to get our communities talking to the people they know best so that we can do much better. But it's also the way we commission services, and Amy is in the audience as well. We've done a lot of great work with the MHIP programme to try and do things differently, but it is all about trust. Habiba is one great example. Sarah and all of the networks we have across South West London, funding groups to do really small pieces of important work with those targeted communities using the data we've got, but matching, if you like, data with good relationships. And we have got a lot more to do, but I think partnership work and building trust is the way we are going to kind of help improve the situation.
Brilliant. Thank you for that question. It was so good. Other questions? Sarah? And then we'll go to the lady behind. I know you've just been introduced, but please introduce yourself.
Well, Sarah from the South West London Voluntary Community and Social Enterprise Sector Alliance. It was great to hear from the community-based projects, really preventative work being done, which is amazing. I know some of them are funded through the Health Inequalities Fund and the ICP Priorities Fund, our own South West London fund, which is amazing. And it's coming to an end in March, and obviously we do know that given the financial constraints we're in, there is a question mark on whether the funding is continuing or not. So I was asking on behalf of some of the community groups I work with, when are we going to know from NHS England on the Health Inequalities Fund, and I guess internally on the ICP Priorities Fund, on potential continuation or not, because obviously December is coming, is close, and groups will have to organise ourselves. And if the funds are not continuing, because it's pretty understandable given the situation, what are our plans with regards to continuing some of these important projects?
Great question, thank you. Sarah?
So we totally agree with you, because one of the things that we really struggle with in the NHS is the year-on-year funding that we get. And we have got actually a commitment from the government as part of the work that they're doing on the 10-year plan that we will start to get 3-year allocations at least, which I think will help us and help many of our providers, and particularly in the voluntary sector. So that's one commitment we've got from government. We haven't seen that yet, so I stand back until we get that. On the Health Inequalities Fund, again, we should know by the end of the year. We get our planning guidance in December, is what we've been promised. So we should know then whether or not we're going to get a continuation of the Inequalities Fund. My expectation is that we will, but there's no guarantee until we actually see that from the national team. On the Innovations Fund, which was a local fund that we developed, I think we have got a full commitment from the ICB to invest more in community mental health, primary care, and that includes voluntary sector and prevention as well. We may change the way in which we do that because we want to do that switch that we've talked about, the shift from acute to community. So we might change the focus of that, and it may not be called the Innovations Fund, but there is a full commitment from the board to invest in that way, and we'll have to let you know as we go through this year exactly how we're going to do that. But it's obvious that some of the really good work that we're doing needs to continue as part of that shift into the community, and it's how we do that over the next few months, I think.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Sarah and Zara. Could you pass your microphone back to Lady? Oh, right. Thank you.
Sorry, to me, Sarah's in the room. I'm Sarah Rackham. Been involved in patient involvement in Wandsworth for 11 years. And I know with all the restructuring that took place over the last 2 years, the patient voice hasn't been quite as supported as I would like to see it being. So my question is, what are your future plans for patient voice to be more proactively supported by the NHS?
Thank you for that. And it was one of the 4 key points in the Darcy review.
I didn't see it on your screen about your actual local ones.
Yeah. So really, really important. Charlotte.
Yes, thank you, and great question. So community voice and patient voice is absolutely essential to make sure we spend our money in the right way. And we have to listen to patients, but also not just patients, but communities too. So we have had a restructure, but I think we still have our very local people in places building those relationships. And also I was talking a minute ago about our community projects where we fund very small community groups to get out into those communities, particularly those core 20+5 communities who experience health inequality. So I think there's lots of different models which we could talk about afterwards, which I can reassure you about the importance of it. But also in Wandsworth you have Mark as your executive director, who is wholly committed to patient voice and funding these small programs to make sure we do everything we can to make it integral to decision making. And Sarah, with the voluntary sector, we have an alliance across South West London, but also we have community voice in the form of an alliance, VCSE rep at Place, and also Health Watch. You know, our partners, Alyssa's here today for the 6 Health Watches, to make sure that patient voice again is strong and enhanced. So we have lots of evidence bases that we kind of go out and talk to people, bringing in all that different kind of data to make sure it's really important, integral to what we do. But we can maybe talk afterwards, and I can give you some kind of more information if that would be helpful.
I'll go to Sarah.
Yeah, can I just say, I mean, I think we learned a huge amount during the COVID pandemic about how we actually engage with communities, because actually having someone that we employ that's called a community engagement person does not necessarily mean that we can engage with communities. The way we do that is through the work that we've heard today around people being in the community and really engaging in a different way. And I think we're learning all the time as an NHS. This is something that we haven't historically been as good as we should be at. And I think there's real potential for us to do all this learning about what's best practice, how do we engage with communities, how do we work with local authorities, with our community leaders, with other people within the community that give us that information, rather than historically the way we did it, which was we'll put a label on someone called community engagement and then we'll send them out to do that, because that just doesn't work. So I think we're learning all the time, and I think that we have huge potential now, particularly with the way we're working, as we've talked about earlier, that is really going to help us in engaging with those communities.
All of this plus, and the NHS was blooming brilliant, and all the health visitors and all the early years paediatric people, we joined it all up. It was all done and then it was destroyed physically. But you've been doing it in the past. It's not just a new idea, it's a long-term, old and tried and trusted thing. Sorry, it makes me cross. It's like you're starting from scratch. You're really not.
Thank you, Sarah.
I'd like to...
would you introduce yourself?
Sorry, yes, I'm the Cabinet Member for Health and Adult Social Care in Merton, and I guess I should begin by saying welcome to Merton, but please don't get the wrong idea about Merton from looking around Wimbledon, because Merton is a tale of two cities, and it's interesting that we've had 2 questions asked in advance from people in Merton, and I think they're both getting at the same thing. The people that I have been elected by on 10 occasions now have a feeling of being left behind. If they were here, I suspect they'd say, this is great, we're hearing really fantastic things that the ICB is doing in Croydon and in Wandsworth and in where else have we covered today? Kingston and Richmond. But there's an area that's not been mentioned. Now, Jennifer Gould asked a question about women's health, and I think maybe underlying that is the view that we share, that Merton is the only borough without a breast screening centre in southwest London. And that's one of the reasons why the people in East Merton feel left behind. But then there's the other bit, which is the question that Tony Burton asked, when are we going to get a health hub? And that's in an area of lower life expectancy, far more long-term illnesses, comorbidity, all the things that make up health inequalities. And the thing that people, and you've just introduced a sense of feeling angry, the people that I represent feel angry that that health hub exists and was provided for the most affluent part of the borough about 20 years ago by the NHS in, would you believe, South Wimbledon, and yet Mitcham, with its lower life expectancy, is still being told it's coming, bear with us, there have been delays. And that provokes real anger and a sense of when are we going to be properly looked after, and when are you going to stop talking about addressing health inequalities and actually do something about health inequalities?
Peter, thank you for that. And I'm going to ask Mark to come back on that, but I've been around in southwest London in various different roles for 25 years, and I've remember the conversations about the Nelson and the Wilson 25 years ago. We're still talking about the Wilson, and we haven't done it yet. So, Mark, we're going to visit it later this autumn, but say a little bit about the plans there.
Yeah, so just to reiterate the commitment to improving the health outcomes for people in East Merton. So what I probably wanted to say was, although there were examples given of other boroughs, we have a PAC model. We have care coordinators in the east of Merton. In terms of our virtual ward, we have a slightly different model of a virtual ward, but we have a virtual ward, again, in the east of Merton. So a lot of what you've seen today, we have a version of in the east of Merton, and perhaps I offline come and talk to you about how we present that to our councillors and our local stakeholders. Just to reiterate, though, we are absolutely about the core 20+5 and addressing the health inequalities. And financial challenges aside, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are delivering services in a different way to the residents of East Merton. And just on the breast screening, there are two things on the breast screening. We have secured some additional funding from NHS England, and we are in conversation now with a number of sites in East Merton to locate the breast screening service.
Thank you. Hopefully, Peter, that provides some reassurance. We'd be very happy to try and communicate back to yourselves and colleagues and make sure that what we're planning to do actually works with the priorities. You're close, you have your constituents. You'll know what the pressing issues are for them. Could I take any other questions? Yes, thank you.
Stephen Hickey, Chair of Health Watch in Wandsworth. Could you say something about, one of the things that came out of the COVID period was a real concern about dental health. And I understand that the responsibility is moving to the ICB. Could you sort of give us a bit of an update on where we are in terms of both prevention and access to dental services, which really concerns many people?
Really good point, and I'm going to come back to Mark again. You've got a microphone coming, Mark.
Hello. So I'm the SRO for dental services in South West London. You're absolutely right. We now have delegated responsibility, and we have a shared kind of model of contracting with the other ICBs. That said, we are aware that access is a real challenge for people in South West London and nationally. We compare really well to others in terms of our access targets. So we are currently in South West London at about 96% of the commissioned activity. We use it. That's not to say everything's rosy in the garden, because ultimately what we haven't done is we haven't met some of the need that's out there. So we do have to look at the way that we're commissioning dental activity. And it just so happens on the 9th of October, we have Dental Day, which is basically inviting our stakeholders, I believe some of you, voluntary sector, Alyssa's coming from Health Watch. And we've got patient representatives there, really looking at what the ambition for dentistry is in South West London, but also what are our priority areas. And one other thing, we've got a local plan now to reach into schools with local dentists to identify those children that perhaps are not getting the right dental care. And also we're going to do one in every care home in every borough as well, so that we're targeting some of our older populations as well. So there's more work to be done.
But thank you for the question. A great question. I know dentistry is one of those areas that people can feel quite frustrated about getting access to NHS dentistry. Any further questions? In which case, I will bring this AGM, our second AGM, to a close. First of all, thank you all for coming today. I hope that you found our review of the past year helpful, informative, and I hope that the case studies you found interesting, particularly as I think they gave us a glimpse into a new future for South West London. So thank you to our speakers today for fantastic case studies. Big thank you to Charlotte and team for organising today. It's all seamless, it all works really well. That's because they've been paddling like mad underneath. And thank you all. So big round of applause for the team. I want to thank every member of staff of the NHS across South West London for an amazing amount of work in the last year. It's been a tough year for all of them, but I'd like to thank them for their contribution. I'd like to thank our partners in the voluntary sector and local government for sticking with us, for supporting us, and for helping us make a difference to our communities. But most of all, we're here for the people of South West London. So let's give a final round of applause to our public. See you all next year.